Okay. All right. Thank you for summarizing that. My next question is, there are always times, I mean, parents sometimes say that when a child, their children face a setback, they tend to become self-critical, get engulfed in self-doubt, and it's very hard for them to bounce back. My question to you is, did you have such times when you had setbacks, you got grades, which you did not expect? And if yes, how did you overcome those setbacks? What did you do?
So when I was in IB, and as I said, the jump between GCSE and IB is quite big. So going into that, it was quite shocking, particularly for my favorite subject, which was English. I was also really good at English throughout my years, but in the first essay that I ever got back in IB, it was a lower grade than I expected. And this is very shocking. And it usually does happen to most kids. Like even subjects you think you're good at, once in a while you get a bad grade. And that does feel really bad. Like I was like really devastated. I had no idea what had happened. I was not expecting it either. So it was a huge setback for me, especially I think up until then I had never faced that bad of a setback, to be honest. So it was very shocking. I was already like 16 and I was like, oh, this is horrible. But what helped me there is that I really did have a goal in mind. I wanted to study English in college, and I knew that if I let myself kind of get defeated by one bad grade here, I wouldn't be able to do that over there. So having that goal in mind really helped me be like, okay, I just need to work towards that goal. This is a setback. I need to work towards it. So I worked really hard on the next one, and I got the teacher's advice. It also helps, I think, there's several things that help with that setback. First is like using your community. So I did complain to my family and my friends a lot. But that really helped me, like getting it off your chest, hearing them talk about it, especially like my dad, for example, he's very supportive of me learning English. So he was just sort of like, oh, you can like he was very much like you can just keep going. And then with my friends, they were very sympathetic. And that helps too because you're all, especially friends in the IB program, you're all in the same situation. They really understand what you're going through in a way that other people may not. So like using them, like talking to them, asking them for advice, asking for people in your English class, like that really helps. And it just helps your mental health too. Like you're not alone, and that really can build up your resilience. And then also just sort of, as you were saying, like it can sow self-doubt when you have a bad grade. It's important to keep in mind that one bad grade does not define your intelligence or even your capacity in that subject. Almost every single person has gotten probably a bad grade in the subject that they're even good at before because they didn't follow the rules or their teacher was in a bad mood or they were in a bad mood. Like it always happens. So divorcing yourself on your self-worth from your grades is really important. Grades are important, obviously, but they do not accurately reflect who you are as a person or how smart you are or how good you are at writing. So I think at that point, I was already fairly confident in my writing skills. So I kind of knew that this didn't mean I was bad at writing. It just meant that I didn't do well at the assignment. So being more specific, like I'm not good at this exact thing and I can get better. Having that kind of growth mindset really helps because if you don't, then you're not going to try to improve. But if you do believe you can, then you will. So, or at least you will try to. So that kind of helped me through that.
So what I heard was, number one, you were very focused towards your goal, and number
Hmm.
two, you were very confident of your skills also. And both
Hmm.
these things helped you to find ways and means of bouncing back, whether
Yeah,
it is
exactly.
talking to others, parents, family, friends, or finding out other strategies like, okay, this is growth mindset. I need to have a growth mindset at this stage, and that is what you do. But
Yeah.
predominantly, what was most important was your focus, what you really wanted, what you valued, and your own confidence in your skills that, yeah, I am good at this.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. Um, any techniques for preparing for exams that you can share with us?
Yeah. So on top of that note taking, so I did this for my IB physics exam, which IB physics is very difficult. It was like it was the only science test I took. So I'm not a science person at all. So I knew that I needed to really lock in and focus for the physics exam. So I did use the Pomodoro technique, which is when you do like 25 minutes of studying and then 5-minute break. What it really helps is to break up the monotony of studying and get you really focused for a short amount of time and then reward you at the end. So I think I watched like a 5-minute anime clip every 5-minute break, and it really helped. I studied like for longer periods of time than I usually would, and it didn't feel as taxing on my brain. And I did end up getting an A star in physics, so I think it worked. That was really good. But I also, so physics, I'm going to focus on it because it's not in my wheelhouse. Physics is not about writing, it's not about English, it's very math based, so it's really not my style. But what helped me with revising for physics, so I had this really big notebook, and I would like draw like sort of try to draw the concepts out, especially for concepts that are hard to articulate in English. Sometimes it can help. As I'm not necessarily a visual learner, but I think a lot of people can benefit from visuals and drawing out stuff anyway. So drawing out graphs or drawing out like ideas of concepts, especially for sciences, is really, really useful because a lot of it is actually visual. It's not like the electrons and the graphs and stuff. It's very visual. So trying to sort of find out what's best for you and also experimenting with different forms as well is really useful. And then the last thing it really is, it's not a technique, but as I talked about chunking your revision, so cramming doesn't work for me at all. I don't usually cram. I can't retain any of that information. So a little bit every day is my go-to. And it usually does help because you're sort of building on what you've learned before and your brain is constantly working every day. And then the last thing is to explain what you're doing to someone who isn't in the subject. So if for physics, for example, I'll be explaining like the electricity and like volts and stuff to my brother who didn't know anything about that. What that helps is to ensure that you know it, because if you can't explain it, you don't know it, but also that you can like translate the wording that you read in the textbook into other wording, because that's really the test. Like you can memorize all you want, and for subjects like biology, you might need to, but at the end of the day, your understanding of the concept is dependent on whether you can take what you've read and change it into your own voice. So it's a really good test for whether you've actually learned what you're supposed to be learning.
Okay. So the big notebook that you bought and the
Mhm.
visuals that you drew, was it something like a mind map, would you say, or was it your own technique that you came up with?
I did do mind maps, so I did them dependent on the subject. So for English, actually mind maps are good for English because when you're brainstorming themes, the themes are all connected to each other. So mind maps are really useful for that. Also just like lists of stuff is really useful. I feel like people struggle with revising for English because it's not so clear cut what you're writing, but I would recommend like the mind maps. For physics, I think it like sometimes I was drawing specific charts for physics, and then other times it was just like it really was just more creative. I don't think there was a specific one for that, but I would recommend doing that kind of stuff, like because for stuff like maths and physics it can seem very anti-creative, it can seem very dry, but honestly it's not. Like math, um like for math, revising for math can feel kind of repetitive too. So trying to break it up with those kinds of exercises where you're like, oh, let me see how I can change this formula or something like that, would can be helpful for people who really don't like those subjects.
All right, thank you. Um, so one last question then. You have taught in schools and you have also tutored students, right?
Hmm.
So you have been on the other side of the table too. So my question
Yeah.
to you is, when you see your students as a teacher, what would you say separates a good student from the others?
Yeah, so I would say that the like the students that were the most difficult to work with were the ones that had already given up on themselves and improving themselves. Because even if someone was, so we had regular testing, so even if someone didn't get that good of a grade, if they were willing to work and willing to engage in classes, it actually wasn't that difficult. Like it was still difficult, but you could see steady improvement. However, the kids that were, some kids were just like, oh, I can't do it. And like, oh, this is like, too hard for me, and they would just shut down in classes. It was very obvious, and it was also just really difficult to improve their grades because they weren't engaging, they weren't putting in the effort, and they weren't even letting us help them put in the effort.
Mm.
So it really is like if you are struggling in a class, like struggling is actually better than not like engaging at all, because if you're struggling, that means you are putting in the effort, you are trying your best. So when people feel like they're struggling, it's actually a good sign because that means you're learning something. It was the kids who were like just completely checked out that I felt were not improving at all. So in general, mindset is actually the biggest thing. Like it has less to do with the knowledge that you come in with than the knowledge you want to gain when you come out of the year. So I was teaching fifth grade, like people were coming in with all different kinds of skill sets, but by the middle of the year, the people who were working really hard had already kind of equalized. So it really is possible to pull up your grade, especially going into GCSE or going into IB, which are very different sorts of curriculums. You can kind of start anew, even if last year you didn't do that well. It really doesn't matter. I've seen people, one of my friends, he was like not that great in year 7 to 9, and he just decided to like really step into it, and it really helped him throughout the rest of the year. So although it's not as easy as just a single decision, like I'm gonna do well, obviously it's not that easy, but a mindset shift is the biggest contributor, I would say, to huge improvements. Like, yeah, getting into that mindset of I can do it, I just need to like find the steps to be able to do it.
Okay, so finding the steps and having the mindset that I want to do well. That is the key.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.